Hello everybody, it is your Peacekeeper coming at you with the next video in our How to Play series. This is the German Battleship Bismarck and the Bismarck class of battleships, of which 2 ships were completed and planned. The Bismarck and her sister the Tirpitz, both of which are currently in the game. A little bit of difference between the 2 ships in that the Tirpitz doesn't get the secondaries that the Bismarck has, but gets torpedoes. Both these ships had relatively short careers. Bismarck launched in 1940 and Tirpitz in 1941. Bismarck sank on her first sortie, but, as many of you already know, not without giving one heck of a fight. She famously sank the battlecruiser HMS Hood by detonating its magazine. I don't think it was fun and engaging for the crew of the Hood. And she also damaged the HMS Prince of Wales in the Battle of Denmark Strait, then later. She was sank after the Royal Navy searched for her for 3 days. Famously, a swordfish torpedo plane from the HMS Ark Royal landed a torpedo that jammed the steering gears and forced the Bismarck into a death circle. Bismarck was ultimately scuttled by her crew to prevent its capture after getting in a prolonged gunfight with the Royal Navy's fleet that they sent to attack her, which included several battleships. Tirpitz, on the other hand, was deployed to Norway to raid convoys to the Soviet Union from the United Kingdom. She spent most of her time in port and was the unfortunate recipient of repeated RAF attacks, including the famous use of the tallboy bombs, which eventually sank her. Tirpitz would only fire her guns in anger once during her entire history, and that was the bombardment of Spitsbergen Island, which was a British weather outpost. In general, these ships exhibited fantastic seakeeping abilities, due largely in part to the wide beam, which is the width of the ship. They were also extremely responsive to helm commands, and according to Wikipedia, they could maneuver with as little as 5 degrees of rudder change, which, that sounds pretty impressive to me. The downside, of course, is that the ships lack any low-speed maneuverability, and when moving backwards, they also lost a lot of speed in full over turns, up to 65% of their speed in a turn. Their construction also differed in that the ship was primarily welded together, whereas previous ships had been riveted together. This would also cause some problems later on with the stern of the ship being particularly weak. Of course, the Bismarck felt the brunt of that when she received a torpedo hit there and jammed her steering gear. These 2 ships, by far, are the 2 most significant ships in the entire Kriegsmarine during World War II. Why? If you think about the amount of resources that the Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force, and the U.S. Navy spent in keeping her, Bismarck, and Tirpitz from breaking free out into their respective patrol areas, be it the Atlantic with the Bismarck or the Norwegian Sea and the Barents Sea with Tirpitz, it is quite staggering the amount of resources that were devoted to that mission. Because of that, even though their careers were extremely short, and really, aside from Bismarck's repeated fight on her only sortie, really weren't that eventful in terms of comparison to, say, the Colorado class of battleships for the U.S., which served in numerous naval engagements. So with that, that's why they're so significant. They tied up so many resources without doing much. I mean, Tirpitz spent almost her entire time sitting in a fjord in Norway. Granted, she was there because she suffered from repeated attacks, including midget sub-attacks, including the multiple air raids from the RAF as well as the Royal Navy. So, anyway, let's talk about how they play in-game. These ships are, by far, the most secondary-focused ship that you have seen up until this point. The big reason for that is because in a full secondary spec build, her secondaries have a 10.6 kilometer range with the flag. The secondary flag, that adds 5%. In terms of accuracy, they're extremely accurate and they have a relatively good chance to start a fire. 8% and 9% for the 105s and 8% for the 150s. And because there's such a large number of them, they're very effective at punishing destroyers. To add to that, they're also the first battleship to ever get hydroacoustic. Being the Tier 8, they're the first one you run into. The Tier 9, Friedrich der Gross, also gets it, and Grosser Kurfürst also gets it. So, you have hydroacoustic to add insult to injury to any destroyers that decide to get close to you. She is also, in my opinion, the pinnacle of the German Battleship Line due to the fact that she is very maneuverable still. She does have those great secondaries. She does have good workable guns, and she does have good solid armor. Her only downside really seems to be the fact that she just takes lots of that white damage, that non-citadel damage, just straight normal penetrating hits, when the person you're facing off against knows how to fight you. And of course, like the Tirpitz, at close range, if you just go bow on and charge somebody, they're never going to do damage to you. It's an extremely powerful way to play this ship. And with a team that's willing to support you, you can bully the enemy fleet around the map. I wish I had it on video, and unfortunately this video doesn't show it, but myself and 2 other clanmates were in Bismarcks, and we literally pushed the enemy team on north around the A cap all the way on the west side of the map, all the way back, all the way over to their C cap without losing any of us. And we could do that because you have 10.6 kilometer secondary range and they're very effective. You've got 3 battleships that have this. You basically set up this no fun zone around you where nothing can get to you and you just keep charging because nothing can do enough damage to you quick enough to actually kill you. And even if they do, there's still 2 more of you. And with a good supporting cruiser and destroyers around you, you just continuously push enemies around the map. And that's one of the strong suits of this class of battleships in the Tier 8. The Tier 9 is, from what I've played with it, she's a solid ship, she's a good ship, she's not really lacking in anything aside from maneuverability, but she doesn't have the same presence on the battlefield that the Bismarck has. And I think part of that is because Friedrich also plays with Iowa and Izumo, and while Izumo's not the world's greatest battleship, she still has a little bit better gunnery than the German battleships do, and just the amount of armor that those ships have at that tier just starts to really punish this up-close and personal gameplay style. Not a whole lot. Bismarck is still very capable, though. She does have 15-inch guns, and she is very flexible because of it. They turn quick, they've got relatively flat arcs, they're not very accurate at long range, which is okay. We don't need a lot of accuracy at range because these ships predominantly play up close and personal. Let's go over the stats. Hit points, 69,200 hit points. She has a lot of armor. Again, relatively weak torpedo protection, 24%. Higher than most cruisers, but lower than most battleships. As I said, her main battery are 15-inch guns. They're in dual gun turrets, 4 of them, 2 front, 2 aft. They do have pretty good firing arcs and allow you to fire while advancing with very minimal profile presented, which is another strong suit of these. You have a boatload of secondaries, 8 of the twin 105mm dual-purpose mounts, which are these little guys right here, right here, right here, and here. You also have 6 of the twin 150mm mounts, which is these bigger turrets here and here. The main battery has a firing range of 21.2 kilometers, and the secondaries, like we said, full out spec with the flag is 10.6 kilometers. It's straight 10, if I remember correctly, or 10.1 or something like that with the without the flag, which is as long as the Yamato has in this game at tier 10 for the Japanese line. She does have a very powerful complement of anti-aircraft, and this is the first tier of German battleships where they don't outperform the US in anti-aircraft, but it is still very solid and it is still very capable. All those 105s represent a very large dual-purpose gun mount sphere, starting at 5.4 kilometers. Again, not as far as the 5-inch 38s on the U.S. battleships, specifically the North Carolina, Iowa, but by the same token, still very powerful. Of course, she does have the strong mid-range as well with the 37mm flak. I think these are Svilings, yeah. In terms of maximum speed, she has a 32.6 knot speed. Let me look and make sure that... Okay, that does include the speed flag, which is 5% to the speed. So, a very, very fast ship. As fast as the Iowa with the speed flag. She has a turning circle of 850 meters and a rudder shift time of 12.8 seconds, which for a battleship is actually really quite good. Her detection range by sea is 15.9 kilometers. Her detection range by air is 14.7. If you're closing with another enemy ship, if you wait to hold your fire until you get spotted, you will be close enough to them that it's not going to take you long to get into secondary range. And once you're in secondary range, when you have the manual secondary skill, they get lit up quick. These things start fires like crazy, especially when you spec it out for full-on secondaries. Speaking of modules, let's go ahead and let's take a look at our upgrade modules. Main Armaments Mod 1 is still the staple. There are some that are going to say Auxiliary Armament Mod 1 is a good skill to take. I'm going to tell you right now, the dual-purpose guns on this are very heavily armored. I have yet to notice losing one, except for when very end of the game and next to no hit points. So I would just stick to Main Armament Mod 1. In the second upgrade slot, Secondary Battery Mod 2 for that increase in range and decrease in dispersion. Damage Control Systems Mod 1 to put out the fires quicker. Steering Gears Mod 2 to help the rudder shift time. And in the last spot, I'm going to do Target Acquisition Systems Modification 1. This is the first ship in the German Battleship Line that gets this slot. The big key to this is the plus 20% to the acquisition range of torpedoes. As tempting as it is to take the Concealment Systems Mod 1 and see a 10% reduction in my concealment range, being able to see torpedoes further out allows you to maneuver this ship in a way to either avoid them or mitigate the amount of damage that you have. Vigilance would be an interesting skill to throw in here, but honestly, between Hydro and Target Acquisition Systems Mod 1, it's really not necessary to take Vigilance. These ships have such good situational awareness so long as you pull your head out of your scope when you're shooting at stuff. You'll also recognize that this ship was set up this way as what you'll see in a lot of my battle montage videos, simply because I play her in Ranked, and in Ranked she is just extremely powerful, especially with a team that's wanting to push. But let's go ahead and let's go on to that battle video. Alright, so this is a Ranked battle, obviously Tier 8. I want to say I'm either Rank 12 or 11 at this point. Key thing to keep in mind, we have 2 Amagis, 2 Bismarcks. Amagis do not play up front very well. Bismarcks require you to play up front very well. Thankfully, in this match, I have a teammate, actually I have 4 teammates that really we owe this match to. First, Salty Rat and the other, Bismarck. For sticking with me through the entire thing. We stayed together and we just pushed them around the cap. So this will show a little bit of that pushing around the cap. While it's not as potent as having 3 Bismarcks in the same division, this is still pretty close. We had great communication through the whole thing. He followed me in. I told him when I popped my Hydro when it went down. He told me when he popped his Hydro when it went down, and we just kept alternating it, so we almost always had Hydroacoustic up. I also want to thank Exalted Starseed for being the Fubuki that stayed by our side pretty much the whole dang match. He could have gone off and done any number of different things that destroyer captains frequently do. Instead of doing that, he decided to stay near us. At one point, he provides us with a good smoke cloud to cover our advance. Also want to thank Archangel BB-01 for his smoke deployments as well. Both of our destroyers were really the MVPs of this match because their smoke allowed Salty Rat and I to go ahead and stay concealed through pretty much the entire game. That right there makes for a very, very interesting battle experience if you're on the receiving end of that, because while you have an idea of where the ship is at, you have no idea where what angle the ship is at or where exactly it's at. You have an idea, you don't know exactly where it's at. And it's that kind of combination there with the 10.6 kilometer no fun zone of the Bismarck that just makes this an unbelievably good game. Now, for being a tier 7 match, I did 149,960, basically 150,000 damage in a ranked match. You also see that even though I've got a pretty good shot on this Tirpitz, we're going to hold off until I'm detected. Well, now that I'm detected, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start looking for targets to shoot at. And that's what I was talking about in the first part of this video. Your detection's not super good, but the closer you can get, the less distance you have to cover, the better off you are. Also, one other thing that contributed to our victory here is the other team seemed to split themselves up once they figured out where we were going. That can work on this map, just gotta be cognizant of the fact that, well, it'll only work so long as everybody is pushing equally and aggressively. Problem is we were far more coordinated. So here's Archangel's first smoke deployment for us. Of course, it comes with the corresponding complaint about, I told you to go on the outside of the islands, and well, yeah. Nah. We're battleships, we're Bismarcks, we gotta go. Yeah, so there he goes. I told you to go wide. Thank you for smoking this up because it covers our advance. Now granted, it's not going to be long-lived and there's little bits and pieces. They know where we're at, but it covers our whole advance. Salty Rat's back there. We're going to, make sure that we cover our advance there with that smoke, but we also want to get close together. So alright, so I've told them that hydroacoustic is up and it's running. The hydroacoustic on these ships goes out to ship detections out to 5.5, torpedoes like 3.8 or something to that effect. Really good hydro. It's the German hydroacoustic, so it's really, really, really good hydro. And that shot right there could have been a little bit better aimed, but that's okay. Anyway, up here is Destroyer Haven, so we got to be very, very careful. Now, Salty Rat has managed to cut some of the distance to us, and of course, Fubuki-chan is going to do her amazing feat here with smoke coming up here pretty soon. One other thing to keep in mind is if you have the manual secondary skill, you absolutely have to select a target in order for your secondaries to fire. If you don't, they simply won't fire. You can see we've already achieved 10 hits and a fire off of our secondaries, and they've only fired those 10 hits. So 1 fire, 10 hits. By the end of this, the number of fires is just insane. And there's 11 more secondary hits. We're just racking up the damage, and like I said, it's all HE, so it's gonna start some fires here. I guess it looks like there is some AP in there. Yeah, there is some AP in there. I wonder which ones those are. There's another fire. 2 fires and 40 hits. And there's Exalted Steel's smoke, just at a critical time. Another fire. And the secondary hits just keep on coming on. And there's another fire. And we have this no fun zone set up. And finally, Salty Rat and I are both close enough together that both of our secondaries are contributing quite heavily to how quickly this Tirpitz is going down. Now, because he's going down as quick as he is, I know we're going to have to move, so rather than stay in the smoke, I'm going to go ahead and push out, and we're going to keep engaging ships. Salty's going to follow me through with this as well, and, yep, there, Tirpitz death coming up here pretty soon. You can see we're up to 6 fires and, what, 80, almost 90 secondary hits? So, I mean, just really powerful how good these secondaries are. And we're up to 50,000 damage already. I mean, what? It's incomprehensible how good these secondaries are until you've actually played them with manual secondaries. Even without manual secondaries, they're actually pretty good. And without having manual secondaries, they tend to focus on whatever they can. Now we got a destroyer, 10.2 out. We've got a little bit of range here. It's a good idea. So, oops, Citadel on the Amagi out there. It's a good idea to get those secondaries pointed on whatever is in range. Destroyers being your priority, followed by cruisers, then finally battleships. The idea being that you want to take out the most threatening targets first. And destroyers actually are pretty easy to kill with secondaries. In fact, if you watch my battle montage, you'll know that I've used it before. Actually, in both videos I've used it to show just how potent they are. Exalted Steel is going to drop us another smoke cloud here pretty soon. He kind of gets sandwiched between us and ends up taking some shells, but we're here. You know, we're both here. I'm trying to get him to slow up so that we can get rid of this Otago that's coming around the island, and he's going to end up being broadside to us. I also don't want him to be in my line of fire so that when I engage, I can go ahead and shoot free and clear. I want to make sure he's clear because I don't want to shoot him. So he salvos out. Here's my salvos. Our secondaries are going. Bam! Melted an Otago. Barely gets around the corner and completely destroyed him. Get the secondary kill for the close quarters expert. That's the first of 2 in this game. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and keep pushing now around the outside of this island. One of their destroyers is up here, the Benson. We're going to make sure we get him targeted. There we go. Asking Salty if he has his hydro up, because we need that hydro to keep his torpedoes at bay. And being as he's 6 kilometers out, you know, it's, he goes pretty quick here. He doesn't end up getting sunk, but he does end up taking a fairly decent amount of damage. One other thing to keep in mind is that your secondaries will stop firing if there's another target between you and them. Alright, a little bit of target ADD there with trying to select which target I want to shoot at. And 4,600 damage taken off that Benson. And there's Archangel. And there's the second close quarters combat. Oh, he did kill him. I'm thinking of the other Benson. Alright, so make sure we calling out targets that are targets of opportunity here. And broadside Amagi is just too hard to give up, and Archangel again popping smoke for us. As we slow up here, we keep our no fun zone up and running. Both of us are focus firing on a target. This allows us again, there's another fire, we're up to 8 now. This allows us to kind of push the enemy around the map a little bit, whereas, you know, if you don't have a team that you're working with, it's kind of hard to play in a Bismarck, because you can't be too aggressive because they will just, your team will just leave you. There's another fire. We're up to 9 now, and 140-ish. 10 now. I mean, just the amount of fires is insane. The unfortunate part about our close proximity is that Salt and I are both very close to each other. As you can see, we're already up to 100k. I'm pulling ahead of him so that I can shoot at this Amagi, since the Amagi is still broadside to us. We're clear of Salty. We'll take that shot. Let's get our secondaries on that Tirpitz. And no Citadel, but healthy amount of damage there. And yet another fire. We also have that high caliber thrown in there. And now we're going to see the secondary hits really rack up, because at close range they are very, very accurate. And as you can see, we're going to go ahead and take our shot off at this Tirpitz here. 7,700 damage. Not a whole lot. Yet another fire. And his secondaries open up just in time for him to die. We'll go ahead and target the Amagi with our secondaries, and we'll get him lit up and on fire. So this is the level of communication that you need with a fellow Bismarck captain. Now he's a little far back, but that's okay. I'm in pretty good shape health-wise, so there's no real risk to me dying suddenly. Their destroyer's not spotted, and he was last seen up by B, so he's really, really far enough away that it's not a big deal. And Amagi, start him on fire before he accepts a torpedo and dies. 13 fires and 214 secondary hits. We'll go ahead and let him know that the hydro is down, and we will engage this North Carolina here. And because he's broadside, and there's a perfect example of what happens. Oop, there's 1,600 in a Citadel taken off of that poor North Carolina. But there was a pretty good example of how angling your armor allows you to bounce shells in these ships. Yup. And the secondary hits are... and there's the end of the game. Okay, recap at the end of this battle. 149,970 damage. That was 10 off. 7,062 experience. Base XP of 1,846. You can see the secondary damage was only 16,818, but 40,000 damage in fires caused by them. Just an unbelievable amount of damage caused by your secondaries. Roughly 60,000 in total, just from that one game. And playing with the good destroyer, playing with another Bismarck, all highly recommended. You can do this without playing with a teammate or with a division mate, but it just gets a little bit more difficult. But man, when you play these ships right and you get in people's faces, they just absolutely dominate other ships. It's amazing. I really enjoy the Bismarck, and she will have a permanent place in my fleet. Anyway, this has been the how to play video for the Bismarck. As with always, guys, like, comment, subscribe, and thank you guys for watching.